Rebuilding a rust-proof Land Rover. This one is part 10. An unorthodox method for repairing the inner structure of this Land Rover Series 3 lower dashboard end. I need to replace the inner metal structure before using glass fibre cloth and epoxy resin to strengthen the part, which needs to be able to support a Defender type dashboard end handle. Why did I use Defender parts in the rebuild of this Series 2A Land Rover? Early on in the rebuild of this Land Rover, in around 1997 I would think, I bought a lot of parts from a man in Huddersfield, and I preferred the style of the Defender dashboard to the Series 3, and I forgot all about it until recently when I started this current second rebuild, as the original dashboard I fitted I think possibly got cremated by the wood-burning stove that my friend Ken fitted between the seats. These days things have changed and old Land Rover parts are at a premium price. New dashboard, sir? Yes, that will be £700. Do you want the lower dashboard as well? That will also be £700. Quite near where I live is a company called Blanchard's that sell mainly military Land Rovers and Land Rover parts. Looking on eBay there was nothing of interest, so I bought a dashboard top that was second-hand and slightly damaged from this local company called Blanchard's, and it was, wait for it, £190 plus VAT. Other parts like the Series 3 windscreen wiper motor cover were more difficult to find. Some of them were in a terrible state, but then I found this one. Externally it was okay. Internally, as I showed in the last episode, it really is diabolical, very rusty with quite a lot of pieces of the metal missing altogether. Also, the prices that eBay sellers are asking for old Land Rover parts are really overpriced for what they are. This one was the best of a bad bunch, and it wasn't very expensive. It was about £50. Once upon a time I bought a part-finished Highlander 7¼ gauge Black 5 locomotive for £5,000. That was a long time ago, and I remember the look on my wife's face and what she said to me at the time. It felt like she was saying, "What? You've swapped our prize cow for 5 beans, are you stupid?" Well, maybe I am, but the sale of the Black 5 helped to put the deposit down on the house we lived in. I need some metal to replace the metal that's missing, and here is the ideal solution. I'm unwrapping it. It is a cheap baking tray. I emphasize the word cheap because if you're going to use baking trays as a source of metal, make sure you don't get one that is covered in a non-stick coating. Recently I made a video series all about a Stuart triple expansion engine that wouldn't run. The cylinder cladding was a bit rough, so I replaced it with some of this stuff. You've guessed it, it's a baking tray. And here I am once again chopping up another baking tray. It's only thin metal, so the bandsaw makes light work of cutting the edges off. I don't need these. This very thin metal from the baking tray is perfect to slide into position, with part of it being underneath the existing metal. I made a pattern using a piece of Christmas card as usual, and then I transferred the shape onto the metal. It needed bending at 90 degrees at just one end. I'm using a small vise for this, although I really don't need to use the soft jaws. Very shortly I will show another use for this small vise. Temporarily I've removed the soft jaws. Before fitting this new piece of metal into place, I cleaned up the edges, and for this I used the belt sander, a very useful tool. This piece of metal that I'm using as a weight was the first piece of metal I ever turned on a lathe many years ago. What is it? It's a doorstop, made from a very good quality piece of bearing material. What I'm doing here is folding back the vinyl because I don't want it to stick to the epoxy resin that I'm about to use to stick the metal in place. It's quite a tight fit, which is good, and by the time I coat it in epoxy resin, this part will replace the missing metal from the structure. The epoxy resin I'm going to use is the 30-minute type. This will allow for some adjustment of the parts before it sets. 5-minute epoxy would set too quickly for the job. Even though this epoxy is brand new, it's very old. I've had it on the shelf for about 5 years. The hardener was okay, but the resin itself was starting to be a little bit crystalline. I ignored this fact and mixed it thoroughly, and I ended up with the right kind of consistency. I'm mixing it on a piece of cardboard, and I'm also applying it to the metal using another piece of cardboard. This stuff carries a health warning. It's not good to get it on your skin. So immediately after fitting this part, I went into the kitchen, which thankfully is right next door, and thoroughly washed my hands using an industrial hand cleaner, followed by soap and water. You can't be too careful. Now I need to wait 30 minutes for everything to set, and here is my solution. My doorstop, followed by the vise on top of the doorstop, puts a lot of pressure on the metal. I've been getting out of bed early recently because there's a lot of work to do if I'm going to make this Land Rover into something viable. I need to bring it back from the zombie-like state it was in to something good. This is the front part of the transmission tunnel, and while the epoxy resin is setting, I'm going to take this down to the powder coaters, which very conveniently is at the end of the village. Although I will paint this part, I've cleaned off most of the rust and it's looking good. It's a drive plate for the spring-loaded four-wheel drive selector. I'm going to start off using some of this stuff. It's a self-etch primer and it's perfect for the job. It really sticks to metal and the top coat sticks very well to the primer. I should be able to get a finish like this. As shown in a previous episode, it is the number plate-like cover. I find that if I place painted parts on this radiator in the workshop, the paint dries very well with a great finish. This part I'm handling is the bezel that holds the rubber gaiter for the handbrake in place. The previous gaiter was perished beyond repair. This is a part for the instrument panel. It holds the support frame together. I've bought a new support frame which is made from metal. The plastic one was badly damaged. I've finished the transmission tunnel. It's ready to fit. And I'm really pleased with it. It doesn't look new, but I don't want any of these parts to look new because it's a 1971 Land Rover. This has got one or two dings in it, but I'm happy enough about that. I cut out the hole by drilling lots of small holes around a scribed circle, and here it is with the bezel fixed in place using brass bolts. Here's a view from the other side where there isn't a hole because there's only one overdrive lever required. I took the transmission tunnel supports to the powder coaters and when I got back, the parts were still in position, but when I lifted them off, the metal stayed in exactly the same place. The epoxy resin had gone hard. At this stage, I fitted yet another missing piece of metal, which I folded from another piece of baking tray. I wouldn't say this job is looking very good, but it's looking slightly better. Now it's top tip time. This is a good one. Because of the missing metal, this area of the cover had sprung apart, so when I fitted the new piece of metal, I needed something to tightly hold it together while the adhesive set. This is model aircraft silicone rubber fuel tubing and it's very strong and very elastic. Now there's only one more piece of metal to cut and fit in place. After about an hour, I removed the silicone rubber fuel tubing elastic band and I was very pleased to see that the metal stayed in the right place. Here, using a Dremel cutter in my small Proxxon motor tool, I'm trimming the parts so that they look as one. I've temporarily moved the vinyl out of the way. I don't want to cut this. Here is the final piece of metal to stick in position. And I know I haven't cut this as well as the rest, but I'm sure it will be okay. Once the 30-minute epoxy resin does its stuff, it's going nowhere. This structure is quite strong as it stands, but I'm going to go one step further and use glass cloth and epoxy resin to glass the entire internal surface. This will make the entire part very strong, and it needs to be because it is supporting a handle. I think I'll just get on with the glass clothing and show you the finished product in the next episode. Because of course, people keep reminding me that this is not a steam engine. To sign off, I'd just like to say I make videos about the things I do, and this is just one of the things I do. Stay safe, stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. and by using the playlists you can actually watch the videos back to back.